perhaps, oh, yeah, there we are. Good, now it's one for the ages, no more swearing. Thank you again for the kind introduction. And perhaps I'm going to get into a little overview. I know for some of you, you may already know a lot about the campaign and the work of the Canadian Wool Council. Some of you, this may be totally new. So I'm here to give you sort of an overview of the organization, our work, some of our projects, and then our new how we're celebrating our new partnership with Alberta Lamb, and some of the work that we're going to be doing together in the next little while, and where we want ideas, where we have materials that can help, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of an overview. But since I do not like speaking into a void, maybe I will start with the video first so that you can reactivate your own videos afterwards. The video I'm about to show, it gives it's good to just sort of dive right into what we're all about. I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategic plan and our vision, but one of the key points of our vision for Canadian wool is rebranding and revaluing Canadian fiber, and part of that is telling the story. So we've done that in a variety of ways, but the video I'm about to show is part of our recent Fabric of Canada video series. This is a series of 4 films that tell stories of Canadian wool and the Canadians who transform it from coast to coast, and help to kind of create that brand, develop the narrative that we're trying to push. The Canadian wool is a premium wool, and that it's capable of incredible things. But rather than have me sort of talk about it, let me share you the video, and then that'll allow us to all see each other afterwards. So without further ado, the Fabric of Canada.
Noyap and Sequatal, IS Chapter Noyap, IS Chapter Noyap, Japemias Yam Shamans Na, Tanachin Plus Knock, Shukomio, on Knock as well. Salish weaving is so significant in our culture. It's foundational to the tradition and culture of our people. One of the highest things we have in a ceremony is weavings. They're not just for looks. They're not just for optics. They all have significance. In a ceremony, a robe is put on you. That protection that is brought through this blanket is spiritual protection. So the weaver has woven prayers of good energy for you to wear for that ceremony. I realized how important weaving is to our people when I saw the photographs from 1906 of our chiefs who went to England to talk to King Edward VII about our land. They were concerned about our land. It's such a beautiful photograph. They're standing so regally. The weavings are so beautiful. And I thought I wanted to do that. I realized I wanted to bring weaving back to our people when I was a teenager, because I wanted to honor our leaders of the day and be able to make them some robes to wear, or maybe wear a robe myself. And at that time, nobody was weaving. I didn't find somebody who would teach me until I was 40 something. I guess it was the right time. Buddy and I started this journey together. When we first got together, we went to a healer, and he came to us and he was like, "You two are going to be working together." And we're like, I work in museums, and Buddy's an administrator for housing. What are we going to do? How are we going to work together? I just thought nothing of it and just thought it was kind of okay. It was only like 1 or 2 years later, we ran into our teacher, and we both went to learn, and then we taught together. It's such a living dream, really, to be able to bring something back to your people. Our people didn't always use sheep wool. Our people used mountain goat wool. My great grandfather was a mountain goat hunter. My grandmother told me that his mountain goat hunting area was the lions, or what we call them, the sisters. And that's a minimum 25-mile hike climbing a mountain. He would do that and get the mountain goat and then have to bring him back.
There's how long that would take. It's all hiking.
Not everyone could be a mountain goat hunter because spiritually they're very powerful. I love working with wool because it's a solid, stable material that takes dye well, and it'll last for a really, really long time. I think the material that we use has its own energy. I think that's the importance of using something alive. We started teaching for the Olympics, and I taught during the day and Buddy taught at night after he finished his day job. I got to go to the opening ceremonies. It is amazing. You know, our people are wearing them, our people are making them. I cried like a baby, like the ugly cry. It was just, it was so important to us to represent our people to the world. It's a privilege to be a weaver. It's really my dream that I've had for a long time. I was born to do this.
So that is the fabric of Canada. That, as I said, that is one of 4 videos. You are now free to share your own video again, so we can see each other. But yeah, that was a part of a series. Each of those videos, there was the full-length video of which you saw an example, but they all also had shorter trailers. And again, we have had an incredible response from those videos through our social media channels. And it's just one story that we're telling, but I'll show another one later in the presentation. But they include the Coast Salish weaving story, Indigenous use of wool. One is about prayer on the prairies. Tells a Manitoba story of a needle felter who created the needle felted busts of His Majesty and Her late Majesty. We also have one set in Ontario that looks at the 100-mile Blazer project, which I'll be talking a little bit about later, which was on a Canadian wool fashion project. And then the fourth one, which is the sweetest one, which I hope to be able to show at the end, is about a 100-year-old knitting cooperative in Newfoundland that operates by they have a shop in St. John's, and then they have a legion of knitters all across the province that produce their products and have for 100 years, all as a social enterprise. So really diverse stories showing the diversity of Canada, but also really different uses for Canadian wool. So all that to say, the campaign for wool was founded in Canada by His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the Queen, then the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, back in 2014 on a windy pier in Pictou, Nova Scotia. The campaign is His Majesty's global endeavor to promote wool as a natural, sustainable, and renewable fiber. So it was started in 2010, and then we were launched here in Canada in 2014. And the campaign has a presence in 13 different countries, and is focused both on all aspects of the wool value chain. And so that's how I got into this, was originally through the campaign. And what started as a program to help just promote wool and remind people of its amazing properties. Over the years, as we ran our annual Canadian Wool Week, which has now become Wool Month, which involves retail and artisanal partnerships, different fun events, all designed to generate a conversation about wool and to show its myriad of incredible uses. But the more that we did this, the more we realized there was quite a bit that needed to be done for Canadian wool. And so that led us to create a few years back our wool plan. And if you haven't, I'll pop the link in the chat in a little bit. But if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's excellent. It's a very thorough document. It involves consultations with the entire wool value chain all across Canada, as well as looking at partners around the world to provide insights about what were the barriers facing the Canadian wool industry, and what did we need to do, or do we need to do in order to address that. I'm not going to lie, it's a hefty tome, but it makes good bedtime reading. So maybe it's like 72 pages, so it can be kind of dense. But what it boils down to, but this is a specialist audience, so I would encourage you to please read. But really, if you want to save the bother, the three major goals of the plan distill down to 3 points: to rebrand and revalue Canadian wool, to advocate for the entire Canadian wool value chain, and to give Canadian wool a voice on the international stage. So you've already seen an example of our work in one of those areas, the rebranding and revaluing. So the Fabric of Canada films, that's part of our plan. We have, again, our Wool Month activations. That's another aspect. For some of you, if you are selling Canadian wool products, we also produce point of sale kits, which include professional signage, postcards, tagging, information sheets, all designed to educate your consumers on the wonders of wool. And that's something, again, that we provide as a complimentary service. And so we can provide an email for anyone who's interested in receiving one of those. But these are all the different ways that we help to rebrand and revalue the Canadian wool clip. In terms of advocating for the value chain, so this takes the form of, we now have a national policy committee that, again, is composed of producers, it's composed of manufacturers, of designers, of retailers, every point of the value chain, to be able to capture the needs of the different aspects of the industry, and to be able to provide a voice for their communities. So that's an ongoing piece. We also work to develop specific opportunities for Canadian wool. We do this through research projects. So we've got, for example, our carpet plan, another great a piece of bedtime reading. But in that dense document, it identifies how, for example, the bulk of Canadian wool is actually a lot more valuable than you've been told. And again, with the right partnership, you can create, for example, they can create wonderful carpets and rugs. And it explores export opportunities, particularly in Europe and Asia, where, again, a Canadian wool branded rug will generate quite a lot of money. One of the other projects that we'll be talking about further in the presentation that's underway right now is our upholstery plan. So again, same idea. Canadian wool is good for high quality upholstery. So again, looking at opportunities for how we create that and what are the markets that we target for that. On the international stage, Ashley mentioned that we hold Canada's seat at the IWTO. So this was a first. This is the global governing body for the wool trade. Canada's the only wool producing country that didn't have a seat, something that the rest of the wool community didn't understand, but was something that was easily rectified and is already sort of developing amazing dividends. So for example, we're looking at a yarn collaboration with Woolmark in Australia, linking it to Canadian manufacturing, while at the same time trying to find uses for Canadian wool in British mills. So trying to sell it as an export product. So that's just one example. But we are now present on the international stage, and I think beyond just having a voice, one of the important parts of being part of that global group is seeing how the others are doing it. So there's lots of other sort of smaller size wool producing countries. So just put it in perspective. The big producers in terms of wool, China at the top, although China, it's the most, but it's not a lot of quality. But then you also, not far down from there, you have Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. So Canada is quite a bit further down, but that doesn't mean that there aren't countries that have been able to make their wool industries a success with the same level of sheep that we have. So places like France, Germany, again, they're able to make it work, and being in that international forum allows allows us to sort of, see what's working for them and what ideas we can steal for the Canadian industry and to better opportunities here. So two projects I wanted to talk about to show again how we work with the whole value chain to really elevate and celebrate Canadian wool. So one is a feature of one of our other Fabric of Canada videos, and that is the 100-mile blazer. So again, some of you may have seen this before. This was designed by the Toronto design house Smythe. So again, they're a Canadian success story. They dress lots of celebrities. Duchess of Cambridge is a big customer, but they're known for their blazers and their jackets. But they had never made anything with Canadian wool before. And I think for a lot of people to think that Canadian wool would be useful in a luxury garment context is may strike you as shocking, because you've probably been told that that's not what we do here. However, there is a not insignificant supply of high quality, finer yarn in Canada. Coincidentally, a lot of it coming from Alberta. But what we did in this instance was, again, we built a 100-mile supply chain around the city of Toronto, and were able to create this jacket using a flock, a small mini mill, an artisanal dyer, a home weaver, and then manufacturer, design, retail, all within 100 miles of the city of Toronto. This got us quite a lot of media. And again, it was a sellout piece. So again, it helped to demonstrate that if you can get these supply chains right, there is a demand for that kind of story, and for knowing that, this jacket that you're wearing, you can literally take a short drive and visit the sheep that provided the fiber, and they're still there. And it's from a single flock as well, which is also very special. Another one, which is a little more broad-based, is as I said, carpets and rugs. So we don't have large quantities of the very fine wool. However, I think there's still a lot that we can do with this. Just before we started the call, Ashley and I were talking about, for example, military procurement, and the fact that one of the big sustainers of the wool industry in the United States is the fact that all American military uniforms are made of American wool. And that gives them a base level of demand, which sustains a very good price, and it sustains a much larger industry than we have. Of course, that's not the case in Canada currently. It has been in the past, but it's not something currently. So again, that's something that we want to target. However, the broad quantity of Canadian wool is suitable for these sort of slightly coarser applications. So carpets, rugs, upholstery, but also in industrial felts and that sort of thing. But one project we built, again, this was 3 years back, was to create a luxury rug made of 100% Canadian wool, designed in Canada. This one was created by Sarah Richardson. Some of you may know her show. And again, this is an example of it. This is at her farm, where we shot for Architectural Digest. But that rug has 7 different knotting and weaving techniques, and it's just so plush. Like, I'm not actually a big fan of neutrals. I know this is very fashionable right now. I find it boring. I like a lot of color, but this helps to show how just sort of the undyed plain Canadian wool in its natural state, but just all the different textures, what can be done. That's all Canadian wool that was, including Alberta wool, that was bought and spun by Briggs and Little Mills in New Brunswick, and then woven into this carpet form. At the time we made these, we actually didn't have the ability to make in Canada, but we have since rectified that. So we now have the ability to do hand tufted rugs in Canada, which is a complete product of Canada rug. And the government of Canada has already purchased a couple of those for the embassy in Copenhagen, as well as Abadibijan. So if you're in the neighborhood, please check them out. But it's just one small way that that proved the concept that Canadian wool can compete with the best in the world. Now, the next hurdle is to try and implement the carpet plan that I mentioned, and how we create a collection of broadloom carpet, so at a much more reasonable and accessible price point, but with a much wider distribution. So we're working with Burrup Brothers of Vancouver, one of the largest carpet sellers in the world. I was fascinated to learn actually Vancouver is one of the biggest carpet markets in the world. But Burrup Brothers is the driver of that, and they have agents all across North America, Europe, and Asia, and they want to create a Canadian carpet. So that's just one a Canadian broadloom carpet. So that's just one area of where we have an idea, we prove that it can happen, and then we look, how do we scale? How do we increase the amount of impact with the Canadian industry? So I know I'm feeding you with a fire hose right now, and that there's I can go on and on about the many different initiatives, but what I wanted to do was to sort of give the group a flavor of the different kind of streams of work that we have going on, and then hear from you, hear what's happening in your neck of the woods, how we can incorporate, maybe there's some really interesting things happening that we can connect into our next Wool Month project. If there's materials that we can provide. Again, our ideas come from all over the place. So for example, the needle felted bust of the king that was very popular, that was suggested to us by the makers of this fine yarn in Carstairs, at Custom Woolen Mills in Alberta. That isn't Carstairs, sorry, but at Custom Woolen Mill. Who suggested this incredible artisan who was needle felting sculpture using 100% Canadian wool. And so we're like, oh, that's a story that we have to tell. So again, I want to leave sort of the bulk of time to that, but I just wanted to talk about two of the things we have coming down the pipeline that Alberta Lamb Support will be helping to support, and these are both items that were covered in our wool plan, strategic plan. So one is the upholstery plan that I already mentioned, that will be looking at, again, opportunities for using Canadian wool in upholstery, for furnishings, in boats, aviation, in automotive. Again, some of these larger scale industrial uses where, again, you can have a high quality product and you can get a high value, a high price, which will allow us to, again, pay the farmer more on the front end of things. So that's one plan. And the second is much more about the infrastructure of what's underpinning the wool industry as a whole, as well as being a necessary support for the sheep industry, and that's shearing. And I would love to hear from all of you about your experiences with shearing. We're in the process of, again, developing this plan of how we bring more people, because again, even if you've got a shearer that you love, you might notice that they're getting a little older with time, as the average age of shearers continues to climb. We need more young shearers coming into the industry, and we also want to have a very high quality of consistent training and accreditation across the country, as well as providing opportunities for shearers who are good, to travel all across Canada, but also to spend the off seasons in the Southern Hemisphere, where they can perfect their skills and also supply the needs of major farms in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and as an added bonus, you can miss winter. So that's one aspect of the shearing plan. But again, we're looking at the whole landscape of what do we need to do to get the young people in, get a consistent ability of quality, and how do we help create lifelong shearers. We're also looking at options for what are some different ways that could be delivered. Is there an option to provide free shearing to farmers in exchange for taking the wool that would then go into Canadian product pipelines that we're developing, like the rugs, like some of the fashion things. So these are some of the ideas that we're working on. and we'll be having public town halls as we roll those out. So again, if that's a topic that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to join in and participate with those. But again, we're developing this right now. So we've got a committee of master shearers from across the country. We've got a very talented researcher who's working on this. So if you have something that you would like to share with regards to that, I'm happy to connect you and ensure that that's fed into the process. But so this is some of the work that's coming down the pipe that will be available in March. But I guess, before I break for questions, I wanted to say that, again, our goal as an organization is not just to produce research that's going to be sitting on a shelf and forgotten. I think many of you have probably seen initiatives like that in the past, and they come and go and they're forgotten. I think what sets the Campaign for Wool apart, and why we've been so successful over these past 8 years, talking about Canadian wool to well, we've totaled up the numbers, it's billions of media views over that time period. So we're reaching a lot of people around the world talking about Canadian wool. But I think one of the reasons why that's so successful is, again, we come up with an idea, we implement it, we see it through, and then we look for, how do we scale, how do we expand, how do we reach more people with this? So yeah, there's a lot happening in the world of wool. The news of wool's death is highly premature. I think, again, looking towards the future, we need natural fibers more than ever. We're facing a plastification epidemic. The oceans are clogged with it. Our waterways are clogged with it. It's showing up in the air. Natural fibers have a major role to play. So our job is to help figure out where Canada can supply that, and what are the high value added products that are going to generate the kinds of prices that are going to allow us to pay the prices to make you happy as producers, or perhaps, as I say, if we can come up with models to even take the burden of shearing off your hands completely, because I know there isn't a lot of you who are breeding exclusively for fiber, that this is going to be a supplementary product. So how do we make that as easy and as profitable a portion of your business as possible? So with that, I'm going to take a breath, have a drink of water, and perhaps open up to discussion about what were the things that you found of interest, how we can work together, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Am I supposed to? Oh, here's where you can type your questions. Feel free to type your questions in the chat, or you can also put up your hand. I know it was very comprehensive. Maybe we can talk, maybe to help spur some discussion, I can talk a little bit more about the military procurement side, and again, how that could connect to Alberta. So again, with Alberta having a large chunk of the finer wool sheep in the country, again, looking at opportunities where we can build a supply chain whereby that fine wool is collected in a way that makes it most useful, being able to process it and turn it into a high quality fabric that's going to meet the requirements of the Canadian military. But again, wouldn't that be incredible to be able to proudly say for members of the armed forces, well, yes, this is made here in Canada of Canadian wool, and I think that there's and then the knowledge that comes from also that can sustain a good portion of the Canadian industry. So that's something that we are looking into. Oh, we've got some questions. Is the Campaign for Wool doing anything to advocate for producers with the federal government around the new Canadian Agricultural Partnership? This is definitely on the agenda of the National Policy Committee. They have not reached a decision about it, but we engage with government quite regularly and are finding opportunities for how we fit wool into the equation. We've actually just finished a series of meetings with both the federal and provincial governments all across the country. And it's amazing, actually, sometimes they often even don't know where to put you, because often in agriculture, the way that the ministries have evolved is they don't even see wool as an agricultural commodity anymore. So they try and bump you to like industry, for example, and not understanding that it's a farm product, comes from an animal, and so thus the policies and the programs supporting agriculture need to think about wool as well. I think actually our recent government partnership, which we signed a 2-year agreement with the federal government, just coming to the end of that now, that's what's helped support some of the production of these films, the production of the kits that we've been distributing all across Canada, as well as some of these research reports. Again, that when we first applied for that, the what we heard back from the Department of Agriculture was like, oh, no one's ever come to talk to us about wool, like at least in when that program officer had been there. So again, I think we are starting to build an awareness with the federal government. But part of the challenge for the industry is that we're also lacking a lot of quality stats on our overall economic impact. So things that other sectors in agriculture already have ready in terms of being able to demonstrate jobs, economic impact, and again, looking at a full value chain of an agricultural product. That's stuff where more research needs to be done in Canada. But again, this is what our National Policy Committee is working to identify. Is Campaign for Wool essentially a marketing firm for Canadian wool? Very good question. So yeah, so we started off as the goal of the Campaign for Wool is public awareness. And so first and foremost, as I say, the beginning of our work was purely from a marketing and promotional standpoint, because it was all about driving consumer demand and reminding consumers of the wonders of this product, which is, it's antimicrobial, it's anti-static, it like is UV resistant, it has all these incredible properties, and it can be transformed in so many different ways. So it was all about kind of reminding people of that. Where we've grown, and I would say that marketing, that promotional, that public awareness side is still a significant part of what we do. But where we are targeting a lot of our resources now is looking at, the developing the strategy, which we did with the wool plan, and then implementing. So how do we address shortage of shearers and accessibility of shearing? How do we address preparing the wool in the best possible way to get the best possible price, and being able to drive production of wool that's going to be useful, being able to develop the partnerships, again, working with companies and reverse engineering their supply chains. So one thing I found really fascinating in this work is that discovering these Canadian companies that are using vast quantities of wool, either commercial spinners, you're looking at industrial and commercial felt making. There's a couple of these companies that are, and they're not small companies. These are like often hundreds of employees and millions of turnover, but they're not using any Canadian wool. And when you talk to them, it's not that Canadian wool can't meet at least some of their requirements. It's that it's been too difficult for them to get it, and to get it in the quantity and the state that they need to transform it further. So this is a lot of, I would say one of the biggest things that we do with the Campaign for Wool is connect these different silos along the value chain that we've discovered don't often speak to each other, in many cases have never spoken to each other. And so, and try and get to build a mutual understanding of, what the fiber can offer from the producer end, and what a manufacturing and what a design input can have in terms of generating that higher price point, creating that higher value added product. Is the Campaign for Wool in Canada looking at CSA approval for wool insulation? So that's a very good question. We actually did a wool insulation project last year. No, 2 years ago. So we, as part of a wool house project, where we had a young family that were completely renovating their home, and they made the choice to do a wool insulation product. let me tell you the problem with insulation. First of all, in order to make those numbers work, for that to be a viable commercial product, they have to pay you pretty low as a producer. The dirty little secret of insulation is that it is a lot of that insulation product comes from low grade manufacturing centers, so it's a lot of wool from Central Asia, places where, again, it's a low quality coarse wool, but it's very cheap. and that's what makes the product work. I think we have looked, and there have been some studies around insulation, but as you point out, there's a lot of barriers to even if everything was good to go with turning Canadian wool into insulation tomorrow. You've got building code issues in every province that you have to address because it's been excluded. So the only way you can use it is by getting an architect stamp. Most people can't be bothered to do that, and you're already paying more, than a synthetic product. So it's already, you're creating more and more barriers. And as I say, at the end of the day, what we're interested in as an organization are wool products where we can make a bigger markup that will allow us to build in a premium price to the producer from the outset to help rebalance. Because it's not like there isn't money in the wool industry. Wool industry has been around for as long as human civilization. It's 10,000 years. It's had its ups and downs in that time, but it's still going strong. What often is the problem is a problem that you probably see often in agriculture, in that a lot of the money-making potential is at the end process, and the producer doesn't often see that. So that's why we're trying to design business models that build a premium price to the producer from the outset and kind of reverse engineer that process to allow us to do that on a regular basis. So we've already started doing that with the carpets, and again, we see this as something that we can scale quite a bit. But it's not that we're against wool insulation. I just think, again, it's not where we should be putting our time or money. Do the conversation Jane had on shearing Canada give her any better understanding of the shearing industry in this country? Yes, well, I believe Jane's been consulting with a number of different shearing groups, as well as I say, her master shearers panel. And I think, again, yeah, you see what she's learning, and what we're seeing is that there's a real diversity of problems. In some areas, there's more than enough shearers, but in a lot of them there isn't. And what we've been hearing is that the quality is inconsistent. And again, but more than anything, it's the availability. And it's also the fear of what happens when my guy goes, because knowing that their career is going to end before the farm's need of them will. So I think we've been taking in quite a lot from discussions, but I would encourage, and I'll leave Jane's email for those of you who don't know. Jane is a member she's chairing our national policy committee, and she's done quite a lot of the research. She's an expert in a lot of this space, so she did our strategic plan, and has been working on the shearing plan for a period of time now. So we're hoping to be able to have something more concrete to you soon. But again, we want to take all those ideas and then come up with solutions for how we implement. Do we have manufacturing capacity to supply wool for the military, or for that carpet project you mentioned in Vancouver, scouring, weaving? Very good question. So again, it's inconsistent. So there is, depending on the scale, there is some, most Canadian scouring is as you know, mini mills. But they are not suitable they're great for the artisanal sector, especially for doing hand knits and really specialty yarns. Great, you can actually make quite, if you're not already doing that, that is the part of the Canadian wool industry that is working very well, in terms of there's always demand for high quality hand spun yarns. But in order to supply industrial, it's a different magnitude of problem. So just to put things in perspective, again, we were speaking to a mill in the UK. So the a mini mill is only doing a few kilos every day. So you compare that to what a large scale industrial plant that we spoke to, Scour, can do. So we talked to one of the best in the world, which is in the UK, and it would take them 1 week to scour all Canadian wool, everything produced everywhere, and it would take them a week. So you can imagine having processes like that allow you to produce a yarn that all of a sudden becomes a whole lot more attractive for a larger scale production. So we're trying to strike a balance. What we're looking at is how can we take advantage of high capacity scouring that's nearby that we can get containers of Canadian wool to quickly, because again, there's no one that can handle really high volumes. And those who do have the ability, there's only, again, a very small group of mills that can handle anything more than an artisanal quantity. They have their own products and workloads that they can barely keep up with demand. So there isn't a lot of capacity with scouring here. So again, what we're trying to do is look at how the options around the world and to be able to build the case to build a larger facility here. As investments go, actually, to build a scouring plant that could handle pretty much all the wool we need, it's going to be a few $1 million, which in the grand scheme of things for an industry, like, it's still not an insignificant amount of money, but it's not a big investment to have to make. But again, you don't want to, you're not going to be building a multi-million-dollar plant until you've secured the demand. And so I guess to answer your question, yes, some of these exist. We've been looking at some textile manufacturing, for example, in Montreal that still exists. Again, I was surprised to learn Montreal is actually still home to some of the largest clothing manufacturers in North America. So again, there's this myth that we've lost a lot of this, but it does exist. Where the break is getting Canadian wool into a yarn or a fabric that these bigger producers can use. So that's what we're working on, and that's what our wool plan is tackling. So for example, with the carpet plan, with the Vancouver operation, again, we're looking how can we supply them a sufficient quantity to be ordering, say, 100 or 200,000 kilos of Canadian wool, and then all of a sudden right there, that's a fifth of our national production. Oh, thank you, Linda. You love our point of sale kits. And you can get more. We still have some extra ones. Again, we usually reserve one per store, but again, we've got some extras from this year. So please, I'm going to just pop her email in the chat. If you email my colleague Alyssa with your details, she'll send one off to you. But yeah, we do, for those of you who haven't seen it, we do make, working with the global campaign, we make a fresh suite of content every year that again are going to help you to tell that wool story to your customer. And oh, they're rolling in quick. I'm gonna have to move faster. I'm giving too many comprehensive answers. Any thoughts of the lack of wool on the agricultural census? Yeah, I think, again, I mean, we spoke to this earlier. We need proper numbers, and what we're hearing from producers is, again, there's a real mismatch with the official statistics. And so again, this is an area where, again, government involvement is important and engagement is important, because again, we want to be able to be tracking what are we producing, and not just how much wool are we producing, but we need to be breaking that down. What are the micron ranges? Where are the concentrations, so that we can identify the opportunities. So then when it's really clear, when you've got those numbers that show, oh, look, I've got enough wool in Alberta that could supply the entire Canadian government needs, then that can spur innovation and investment. So which is what we're trying to do. So we'll plan consider regional differences across Canada in relation to breed variation. Yeah, so the very good point. And Canada is blessed with an abundance of breeds. This is both a blessing and a challenge, because again, when you're looking, it's very good on the artisanal side. And again, we love working with specialty breeders. We do an annual shearing event, for example, with a farm of Shetlands that are wonderful. That for those who don't know, haven't had access to Shetlands, they're really quite precious sheep, and they're less intimidating, especially for people who haven't had to deal with sheep before. But to answer your question, a lot of our stuff is looking at the macro. So how do we look at what Canada produces overall and get as much of that into new products? I guess to put things into perspective, currently, so that artisanal market, so we're using, and all other Canadian wool production, we're only using about 10% of what we're making right now. So everything you're seeing now made of Canadian wool, that's about 10% of production. So that's 90% that traditionally has been going to China, that we need to find a use for, and that is also, that's going to be affecting the bulk of producers. So I guess to answer your question, we always see a place for regional products and breed specific products, but by nature of the volumes of those products, those are always going to be niche and specialty opportunities. So we want to encourage and support them through our branding, through our marketing support, but where we want to invest money in terms of business planning and developing new opportunities is going to be in the larger scale applications, because it's just going to help more people and use up more wool. Thoughts for building infrastructure in Canada, process. Yeah, so again, this is part of the plan. So when you look at the carpet plan, it looks at, again, these different methods and pipelines for production. But even when we're talking about short-term outsourcing of scouring, it's always with an eye of, like, once we have that critical mass, we want to use that as the business case to invest in a Canadian facility. And there's a lot of discussion of where that could be. I mean, I think there's a strong case that the prairies is actually a very good place for it, because of both geographically for the rest of the country, but also because of access to particularly the higher quality, finer breed wool. So yeah, this is something, but this is going to be a medium, like this is going to be 5-10 years out, that we're going to be able to make those sorts of investments. To prove it in the short term, we want to be able to be generating revenue, to have companies making money off Canadian wool now, to show that there's a market for that kind of investment. Are you sourcing wool for manufacturing, for the carpet mills, buying and selling wool? We are, and yes. So once we are, this is literally the next project, is how do we do the large scale broadloom production? And then as that kicks into gear, there's going to be a lot of wool that we'll need. So we're not quite there yet. But yes, this is something that through our manufacturing and retail partners, they're going to need to be sourcing wool. And that's what we're there to help, is to connect them with that, to make that happen. What is the incentive?
Sorry, Matthew, I'm just going to quickly say, I thought you were done. You missed a question between Linda and Jennifer from A Baker.
Do you consider, is that the same one? Oh, thank you. Do you consider 3 kilo for the carpet plan a good price for wool, or in the projections? I know producers are getting 270. Yeah, I mean, again, the plan was written was written a few years ago. We have to be, we're trying to be optimistic. We're trying to pick a figure that is going to be better than what you're getting. But also we can't completely defy the global pricing. Again, we want to move away from looking at Canadian wool as a commodity, because we're never going to win that commodity game. We don't produce enough of the good stuff to be able to compete there. So where we're going to make money is in creating these higher value products. And then part of that is going to come down to demand. So if Canadian luxury rugs take off, if Canadian broadloom takes off, again, then that's going to affect pricing. That's going to mean pricing is going to go up. And I mean, it's an economic, we're not trying to completely, we're trying to give the system a heads up, but we can't control the market completely. So we want to give the best possible price within what the market will bear. So again, I think that's I think no one's ever happy on the price they get for anything. It can always be more. And we're always looking for ways to do that, but it's, I think that higher price is going to come from creating a Canadian brand, creating Canadian products, and then that's going to just pull the whole industry and the whole price along with it. So I hope that answers the question. And then the census one, regional structure, sourcing, yes. Incentives, this sharing costs. Yeah, so again, so this is a very common complaint from Jennifer about you know, even if you do get a good price for your wool, it's not covering the cost of shearing. So that's why, again, we're looking at, is there a model whereby, for example, do we create a guild, and do we have staff shearers that work to provide a service for a very reduced price or free in exchange for taking this wool and bringing it into these product pipelines? Can we make the numbers work on that? So this is something that Jane's working on right now. So again, we want to raise the incentive. I mean, again, you know, it's important to understand wool represents 1% of the global textile trade. So it's still, you know, there's still a lot in that 1%. But, you know, we're never going to be able to compete with synthetic on price. So where we have to you know, be able to squeeze the value out of wool is by, again, developing these high value added products and building models that are not just favoring the manufacturer at the end, who, like with, say, an insulation product, is not paying very much to the producer at all, but rather where you're creating a value chain whereby you've got a premium price up front, so the farmer knows that, you know, working with this with us is going to get you the best possible price. And that's all I can promise you for now, is that we will be, in all that we do, working to get the producer the best possible price and better than anyone else. So that's our marching orders. Because again, we know that it's a drag for a lot of you, especially where it's not your primary concern. One scouring plant means most places will have to ship, and diesel prices. Yeah, so again, there's trade-offs. So for example, we did look at, for example, when we actually calculated the carbon footprint, particularly of sending wool from Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes, it is actually, for the time being, it's less to send it by sea to the UK, and their factory is actually more modern than it is for you to ship it by car to Briggs and Little in New Brunswick by truck. So it's like, you know, some of these, you can get into really wacky numbers here in terms of trying to figure it out. So you're always going to have to make a choice of, you know, you want to do the most sustainable thing, but you also want to do the thing that's going to make the most sense for your industry. So before any kind of major investment like a scouring plant, again, you not only have to have the demand, but you have to build that complete business case out. So I don't have those numbers because we haven't done that yet. But we would look at all of that before making that sort of investment. And if in the end it doesn't make sense financially, you know, people have to be cool with, well, you know, that there's the only way that we can make this work environmentally and financially in the best way is actually we're going to send it to the States or we're going to send it by boat. So, but again, it's you have to crunch the numbers. You have to figure out what works. But again, we're all driven by, even when you're adding up the shipping and the diesel, it's still a hell of a lot better than the carbon footprint of oil and gas in general, and the production of synthetic materials that are never going away and are just going to get smaller and smaller in our water and our air. These excellent tools. Oh, yes, thank you, Linda. Very good. More praise for our point of sale kits. Is that we'll do the same thing the other part. Get the money, goes to the middleman, the price of retail. Yeah, so again, this is why we're trying to build these value chains this way, is not the traditional capitalist just total free market, because that's not working. What we want to do is it's still going to be a free market. I haven't signed any manifestos yet, but what we want to see is a model whereby there's perhaps social give back, that maybe some of the profits are going back to support the cost of the sharing, for example, or they're going to reinvest in marketing and promotion, or again, they're going into that front end premium price that we're going to pay to the producer. So, yeah, like I would say we are looking at a cooperative model in many of these business models, but that also is going to be involving private enterprise. I mean, and you can see actually how it seems like it won't make sense, but there are models where you have a real mixture of, you have like government oversight and involvement, but you have private industry. And Harris Tweed is a great example of that, where you have private mills, you have individual weavers, you have individual producers, but then you have a state or a publicly owned authority that oversees the brand and the standards, and an active parliament that kind of keeps it all running. So I think there is a role for government, there's a role for private industry, there's a role for all aspects of the value chain in order to build these kinds of models. Campaign for YouTube. Yes, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, the campaign, our videos, video series, there's some really good ones in there, and I know I've been talking through our time here, so you'll have to watch them on your own. Tanning hides. Yeah, this is something actually Jane's working on. Again, we throw out quite a lot of hides. And so looking at ways, again, of reclaiming all this material that is otherwise going to waste. That's very important. Production is taking a big cut. Labor and equipment operating costs are extremely high. Yeah, so which is all the more reason, good point, Alexandra, all the more reason why we can't have cheap wool products. We shouldn't be associating Canadian wool with a cheap product. In order to make it work, to get everyone paid, and to make the products that are going to make that happen, they're going to need to be high value added products. So and they exist. The margins on carpets are very good. The margins on upholstery are very good. You know, we want to be able to let's get a slice of that for Canada. And it's important to remember we only have 1 million sheep. So again, you know, some of these, they seem like insurmountable challenges, but a couple successful initiatives, all of a sudden we're using a lot of that 90% of Canadian wool that's currently going to China. Talking about cooperative wool growers not working for us. So interesting, Wool Growers was involved with us from the very beginning. Eric stood next to me on that windy pier in Pictou, Nova Scotia, when Their Majesties came to launch the campaign. We've worked with the campaign with the cooperative for years and years and years. Where we've found difficulty, and I'll leave them to explain their actions, is that you know, we found that we were providing a lot, and we were asking for the campaign, or for the cooperative, to get more involved, to partner with us on some of this research, on the government project, for example, some of the challenges of the industry, and that was not something that they were interested in doing, and for whatever reason. So I'm pleased to see that there is been some support for after our engagement, that there has been some investments into innovation. That was something that didn't happen at all before, that they spoke to on some of our earlier discussions. So again, there has been some progress there. But again, our door is always open. We will work with everybody. Our goal is just to get as much Canadian wool for the best price. I think the existing model with wool growers, as the pandemic showed, you know, it's that old model of shipping it all to China. It's not working right now. It probably won't work again for a while. And even when it was working, again, the price was very low commodity price wool sales for Canadian producers. So we're not trying to bypass them. We're just trying to use more of their product in Canada, rather than selling it to overseas manufacturers, where it's going to lose its Canadian identity. We want the Canadian wool content to shine, and for that to be the key part of a model that will allow us to pay more to producers. So, but if the co-op calls us tomorrow and wants to work on a project, we're there. I mean, we've tried, or we did a number of things together over the years that we were partners. But for the time being, it's not their priority. I think they have other areas that they're focused on, and so you'll have to direct questions about what that is. We're not going to get any shearers in this country to shear wool. She doesn't understand the concept. Well, I beg to disagree. I think when you talk to shearers, they're pretty passionate about what they do. It's about finding those people, and also understanding that maybe your future shearers aren't all around you right now. The majority of the Canadian population is in cities, and what we're seeing right now, particularly with the pandemic as well, is a really big disconnect between, people want more meaningful jobs, and I firmly believe there are some young shearers out there working jobs in the city that if they were exposed and provided the opportunity to get into this industry and supported in a way that they can make it a career, I think that being out all day on a farm and missing winter by hanging out in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, it can be, for the right person, can be a pretty awesome job. So I think, again, it's about packaging it properly. It's about recruiting well, and it's about finding the right person. It's certainly not for everyone. I would not make a good shearer, but for those who try and love, I think it can be a great way to earn a living. So I think I've rolled through everything there. So I know we're a little bit over. I don't know if there's any other questions or discussions.
There's another one that actually just came through from Linda, just a comment.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, thank you, Linda. Yeah, exactly. We should be a premium commodity. I mean, you're absolutely right, Linda. Like, we don't produce a lot of wool. So again, by global standards. So what's going to get us the most amount of money is turning it into a premium product. Canadian wool, pure as the driven snow. I think we often forget, living here, that the world has a pretty positive impression of Canada, and we don't often tap into that to the full extent that we can. And so I think we've got a good narrative. We have very high animal welfare standards. We have excellent producers. We've got an incredible landscape. You've got a diversity of breeds. You've got a diversity of sources if you're looking to tell a regional story. It is about creating these high value added products, so that, again, Canadian wool is seen as, like Belgian chocolate. Belgian actually doesn't produce any chocolate, I can tell you, but yet you associate that as being like the best that you can get. And I think we can do that for Canadian wool. We're already seeing that with a number of the products that, what you've been told for years, that your wool isn't worth anything and that you have to sell it to ship it off to China for pennies on the barrel. It's not the case. And we're working hard to make that a reality for more and more producers. Conservation groups, thoughts with partnering with conservation groups to help with branding Canadian wool. I'm not sure what you mean, like breed conservation groups, or like natural, like for like rewilding, or
can I just speak directly?
Yeah, of course. Yes, our first verbal question.
Well, I've been partnering with the Wild Sheep Society to buy wool for a wool pellet, like we have a wool pellet mill. So they have paid for the wool at a better price per pound. And then the wool is not being wasted. And then part of the proceeds go back to wildlife conservation programming. So, and I've seen in other countries that there are conservation groups teaming up with like merino sock wool, like you see it in the outdoor recreation, using merino wool, but having part of their funding going towards conservation efforts. And Canada is kind of known for their environment and wildlife. So that might shed some good light when seen from an international realm, buying Canadian products.
Yeah, that's
You know,
great.
kind of
I
adding
think
a
that,
conservation lens to the branding.
yeah, and I think that's an important story that, again, we've been gathering research on that, but there's also more that needs to be done. But I think we know as enthusiasts, that sheep farming is good for the landscape. It's good for biodiversity. It's good for birds and insects, and you create really diverse habitats when you have sheep graze over a long period of time, and it helps to often rehabilitate marginal lands. And of course, sheep can be used in areas that aren't suitable for any other kind of agriculture. So so telling that story, having social givebacks, I think, with all of the products that we develop with the different companies, we always insist on a social give back. So whether that's reinvesting in wool innovation, whether it's ascribing to a particular cause, I think that that's socially driven consumerism is alive and well, and I think that it is the way of the future. I think particularly young customers want that social story when you're buying a product. So yeah, no, I think that that's a great idea. I think it's very important. The more you can link, your fiber to improving the planet, to making a better and healthier landscape, I think it does great for the industry as a whole. I'm just conscious. I wasn't sure of our time, so I hope, if I don't want to hold people for past, but were we till 10, Ashley?
We were till 7:30-ish, but I mean, if there was conversation going, I wanna to halt that.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, as you've no doubt encountered over the last hour, I'm able to fill the time. So I'm happy to continue talking if people are. But I also don't want to, if people are feeling trapped, feel free to drop off at your convenience. But again, happy to answer any further questions or ways that we might work together. I think again, just a little bit more about the international connections. I think it's really exciting because for what we're hearing from our international colleagues is we're like, is that, oh, we always sort of knew Canada was around, but it's like we never really knew a lot about you. Like it's kind of interesting. It's to be over the last sort of 2 years of our coming out to the global scene, and people, again, us bringing our preconceived notions of what we think our wool is worth, and then having feedback from big companies, buyers, brokers, manufacturers, and be like, oh no, that's good wool. Like you can do a lot. Like the majority of Canadian wool actually falls in 27, 29. So even micron. So even using it for carpet, it's actually even on the soft side for carpet, but it makes a wonderful luxurious carpet. So but you can do a lot with that micron, and that's not what I think producers and people in this industry have been told for a long time. I think you've been told that let's cheap and pack it up, ship it out. And for certain wool, I mean, you made a good point about Jennifer, about pelleting. Again, that's a great opportunity to use up wool that otherwise, like neck and belly wool that otherwise, isn't going to go into the higher value added system. And when I'm saying high value added products, I think it's easy to assume that's all like luxury and expensive products. It's not. What it means, of course, is that we're looking for the high margins. So there's industrial products and things like that where you're making, a cheaper, say like an industrial felt, where you can use quite a coarse wool, but the price point is very good, and the amount of the amount of margin in there to be able to squeeze more out for the producer and for social impact is higher. So again, that's kind of what we're targeting. 5 to 10 years, Canadian Campaign for Wool will be purchasing or starting processing facilities in Canada. We might be the ones, or it could be a consortium of industry. It could be private investment, could be government, private investment, with us playing a coordinating role. I can't say that it will necessarily be us, but we're going to be the ones pushing for all of these things to happen. And and more often than not, if we can't get someone else to do it, our track record is we do it. So again, we're not shy about taking on these projects. I mean, the 100-mile blazer, for example, that came from, you know, someone telling me, absolutely, you can't, Canadian wool can't be used in clothing, like flat out. Like they were just like, you're never going to do it. It was like, okay, well, and then again, you talk to the right producer, you find the right yarns, you talk to the right artisans, and all of a sudden you've created this sellout product that's on the front page of the Globe and Mail style section, you know, telling that really detailed story about all the parts of the Canadian wool industry. So yeah, so I think that there's a lot of things that we can do when we put our minds to it. So no, I won't commit that we will be personally opening a scouring plant, but we will be working to ensure that there is scouring capacity for Canadian wool and playing a role in doing that. And it might just be our plant. We'll have to see. What can we look forward to seeing and hearing on the ground here in Alberta? So yeah, so first and foremost, as I mentioned, for those of you who are marketing and selling your own wool, please do get in touch with us. Get a point of sale kit. That's something we can provide. It's tangible, it's real, something we're doing right now. I think another way to get involved is, again, if you have ideas around solutions for shearing, if you have ideas on value-added products, if you have ideas on you know, sources of large amounts of fine wool, what have you, we want to hear from you. Please get in touch. Again, all of these projects that we take on, they have often started just because someone mentioned, you know, I know a neat thing happening. How can we shine a bigger light on this? I think we're also, you know, I'm talking with Ashley, but we also want to hear some ideas from you about that. We've been throwing out ideas for, you know, I know there's Alberta producers that are using sheep with solar arrays, and they're using it as sort of as a landscaping product, basically. But can we create products that are made from that wool to, again, help tell that story? Is there again, can we source enough fine rambouillet to be able to create a luxury or a high quality clothing fabric that could be used for the military? You know, I would love to hear from the group on different ideas. And so Ashley and I are already talking about ways where we could promote Alberta wool and the Alberta wool story. Again, if we're able to get some more support, perhaps you know, our next Fabric of Canada video, we look at doing a distinctly Alberta story. I think having sheep with the Rockies in the background, if any of you have that vista, we definitely want to hear from you, because again, we want to film. That's going to sell 1 million carpets right there. Is just having that romantic image of Canada as the front for our Canadian wool products. So we've also talked about maybe some involvement with the Stampede. We've supported other fiber and agricultural fair events across the country around, you know, programming of sheep and wool, special productions. Just recently, for example, with the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto, we worked with them who we sponsored for many years. We helped them to design. It was actually Canada's foremost tartan designer, who is from Alberta. She's a dentist from Alberta, and she designed their 100th anniversary tartan and had it registered with the Scottish Tartan Registry and things like that. So we'd love to hear your ideas, but we are working on looking at ways where we can have either an Alberta project, a value chain project. Again, the sky's the limit. But we want to be able to do something that's going to really, you know, shine a light on your farms and the product that you're producing. So these are some of the things that we have in the works. So again, we want to hear from you on reports. Happy to give you point of sale kits, and we want to work with you on special product development. Romanoff wool is an extra carpet wool, and yes, there are Romanoff. Yes, there's lots of Romanoff, very prolific breed. But I believe Romanoff is hair sheep, and that's wouldn't be a good carpet wool. Could be wrong there. I stand corrected. Please, I'm not a sheep expert. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be good carpet. But perhaps you have a method that we could tap into. So please let us know. Ingrid, this is a partnership with ALP. How will this partnership be implemented? So yeah, processing those to help expand capacity. Yeah. So again, this is an area we're looking at for, because that's major capital investment. So that's certainly not, I can tell you, that's not in the immediate scope of what we can do right now, but it is what we can look at how we can support, whether through partnering with the Alberta government or the federal government for larger scale investments. Again, Alberta is home to one of kind of the three medium-sized mills, which are custom woolen mills, and is also one of the only ones that can do commercial cones. So that's why we've been looking at a couple opportunities, including we found the factory here in Toronto that does all the sweaters for the Canadian military. So we've been looking to see how this Alberta wool from custom could possibly be used to create military sweaters or a commercial sweater product. So yeah, it's being implemented in terms of involving Alberta in in our research program, involving it in the distribution of our materials, and involving it in our plans for product development and pipeline development. In terms of mills specifically, again, we would love if you know others other than custom that have capacity. We would love to hear from you, because again, the challenge we find is we can't even in small batches get Canadian wool in any kind of quantity on any kind of a reasonable time frame. For some, I know a lot of mini mills have very long backlogs, and for a corporate client, it doesn't work. So we need to be able to find mills that have more capacity, and we don't claim to have the monopoly on knowledge. So please, if you're aware of other larger scale scours, please do share them with us, and we would love to talk to them and see how we can incorporate them in projects like our carpet project. On the various committees and boards. Yes, very good question. So again, we have a variety of opportunities to be involved. So again, if you have a particular interest in our national policy board, we also are planning to nominate at least one Albertan to one of the main working groups of the International Wool Textile Organization. So again, our international group. So Ashley and I will be talking more about that. But we have an opening right now with the biosecurity group, and want to talk. So again, if that's an interest for anyone there, that's one area. But also, as other projects come up, we want to be able to identify. So this is something where Alberta will be now playing a role. Yeah, that's we are a national organization, so we want to be able to have representation from all the sheep and wool producing parts of the country, which is everywhere except Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. But we've got some sheep in Yukon, so we can claim them at least, but all the provinces. Yeah, most certainly. So again, if you have a specific, if there's a specific area of interest, if you want to be involved in the international work, if you want to be involved in local projects, if you want to be suggesting, a designer we should be working with, if you want to suggest any of these things, if you want to sit on one of our boards, please get in touch. We are a very small operation. We do big things, but we don't have a big staff. We rely a lot on volunteers. So the more Alberta representation, the better. So please do get in touch, and we'll help find something for you to do to move this all forward.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew. I don't see any other questions coming through. Maybe what I'll do, if you don't mind, are you okay if I were to share your email out with the participants on the call when I share the webinar recording, just so that we can have a way to directly contact you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, because I don't see any other questions, did you have any other comments, Matthew, that you wanted to mention tonight?
Well, I just, yeah, I mean, I want to thank everyone for enduring. I mean, obviously, this is a topic of great interest. You wouldn't be sitting around on a lovely Wednesday evening if this wasn't something that you cared about and wanted to learn more about. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you, Ashley and Alberta Lamb, for this opportunity and for your support. And I just want to share that this is an exciting time for Canadian wool. It may not feel that way. That there's been some bad decades. It's and there's some comfort in the fact that this has been shared by all wool producing countries around the world. Even the wealthiest and most profitable industries have had the last few decades have been bad. A lot of ups and downs, and particularly for the countries like Canada, who produce more coarse wool. But it's also a really exciting time. We have an incredible product. We just need to create more opportunities for it, shine it up a little bit more for the international market, and we can create amazing things. And I want to thank Alberta Lamb for its visionary leadership in investing in Canadian wool. You know, I think Canadian wool has been forgotten for a while. It's not just a pennies on the barrel commodity. It can be a really incredible thing, and we're looking forward to working with you on making that a reality, as I say, for more members of the wool value chain from coast to coast to coast.
Well, thank you again so much, Matthew, to you for taking the time to meet with our producers this evening. I know that from ALP standpoint, we're really pleased with the partnership and looking forward to collaborating and working with the Campaign for Wool and the Canadian Wool Council. And a thank you to our participants too, as well, like you'd already mentioned. In saying that, this will conclude tonight's webinar. I will be sending an email to everybody who registered for this evening's session that will include a link to where you can access the webinar recording if you want to take some time to rewatch it. As well, that email will include Matthew's email address in case you want to reach him, or please don't hesitate to reach out to myself either. So with that, I wish everybody a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, everyone. Feel better, choose wool.
Yeah.